One. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to Be Your Own Hero. I'm a stage 4 prostate bone and lung cancer patient slash survivor. Been dealing with cancer since late 2020, early 2021, doing very well. And my guest, Teona, and I, who you met last week in last week's episode, we're talking about the weather that we have here. And today in Texas here, and I'm outside of Abilene, which is about 2.5 hours west of Dallas, it is the hottest day of the year. We're in triple digits, and which is normal for this time of year, but this is an unusual summer in the fact that this is our first really, really hot day. Actually, yesterday was pretty hot, but not as hot as today is. But it's all good. We're inside filming in air conditioning, and we're gonna get ready here for a fantastic part two with my guest, who is absolutely awesome, and her name is Teona Ducre. Teona, please reintroduce yourself, and we are going to get into a great conversation.
Hey, Mark. Thanks again for having me back. I'm really excited to be here. Loved your show last time I was on it. Had a really good time talking to you and excited to be back this week. So thank you. Again, my name is Teona Ducre. I am an almost 10-year pancreatic cancer survivor, and I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia.
But she's going to be moving to Southern California. I'm like,
I
most
am. So
people,
get away from
most
the
people
hot
are,
weather.
most people are leaving Southern California. She's going to Southern California.
Yes, I am
So
trotting my way to warmer, cooler, better weather and getting away from this 106 heat index that we're having right now in Atlanta, Georgia, and hopefully getting away from the humidity.
sounds good to me. Um, So we ended up your story, and one of the things that you talked about was your son's football team and what they did for you uh, with cancer. So let's start there. And would you please share with us some of the great things that your son and his football team did for you?
Absolutely. This is actually one of my favorite stories to tell. We had kind of like a little nickname for the group I was teaching then. So it was Miss D's Groupies, is what everybody that had kind of jumped on board with this cancer journey I was taking. And one of the most remarkable parts about it was the high school football team, a group of boys became part of Misty's groupies. And my son Grant was playing football at the time at Centennial High School here in actually Roswell, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. And the boys became incredibly invested in my cancer journey, which, if you can imagine, these kids are like 14 to 18. He was 15 at the time. And I think a lot of times we think of teenage boys as being very self-centered, very arrogant, a lot of times, especially football players. But this was probably one of the sweetest, most wonderful group of young men I've ever had the pleasure to meet in my life. And mind you, I teach, so I've met a lot of high schoolers, over the 12, 13 years that I had been teaching. But this particular group was very special. And my son, who was also not just my caregiver, but an advocate for pancreatic cancer as well, at just the age of 15, organized without me even knowing a football event one night during their games. And it was not only a fundraiser for pancreatic cancer, but it was an opportunity to spread awareness about the disease. Um, his whole high school was actually incredibly involved. His teachers, his coaching staff, his counselors, just other students, parents had become really involved and were not only my cheerleaders, but they were doing lots of things to raise awareness. So this event that my son had organized, again, without me knowing, I had been the team photographer for several years. And one night during halftime, all of a sudden the announcer comes on. And he says, "Hey, tonight we have a very special thing that was organized by Grant Blevins. Teona, come on back down to the field," because I think I was kind of walking off the field. So I kind of, walk back down there, and all of a sudden I see all the boys lined up on the sideline. And I knew they all had purple socks on that night or something purple, like they all wear these little bandanas and different things. So I knew that they were kind of doing that, but I didn't know anything else was coming. And then I turn around and shockingly enough, I see this group of boys on the sideline, and each one of them has a purple rose. And in a line, they walk up to me one by one, give me a hug, give me a rose. And my son was the very last person in line. And I always get really emotional about this, so sorry. But it was just so sweet. Um, and he comes and he says, Mom, I love you so much, and this is for you. And you're gonna win. You're gonna win this. And we're out here playing for you tonight, Mom. And he was selected as the team captain that night, and the boys didn't win. It was just a great game. It was a great moment. A considerable amount of money was raised that night for pancreatic cancer. And it was something I'll always remember because these boys were part of my journey. They were there for my son. They were there for me. Our team that year, I am very proud to say, they won every single game of the season. And I am a super, super superstitious person. And I had a pair of, their colors were blue, and I had a pair of blue Converse that I wore every single game with purple laces in it. And before each game, their quarterback, who recently got drafted to the NFL, would come, and I was already bald by then, and he would come every night before the game. And his tradition was he would never talk to anybody else before the game, but he would come by when they were going into the stadium and he would rub my head. And that experience of not only being part of the team, but having kids uh, be so invested in something that was otherwise very scary, I think, for a lot of people, was just not only warmed my heart, but to this day, every single kid on that team has a very special place in my heart. And some of them are still in my life and in my son's life. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity and that
Wow,
experience.
that's phenomenal. That that
Yeah.
is that is absolutely incredible. Now, were you teaching at your son's high school?
No, I was teaching at a totally different school.
Oh,
But
okay.
I was just one of the parent volunteers, so was super involved. Um, I had a adversity to calling chemo days. So they very quickly I adopted this idea about I love sports, and chemo days were game days. I would like wear a jersey, and everything was about hyping me up for game day. And my son, it was, the Super Bowl was the surgery. So we even had like a pep rally in the room right before I went into the OR on the day I was having surgery, that they actually had to come in and tell my friends and my son. They were like, "Hey, there are other patients. You guys are being really loud," but they were like getting me hyped up about surgery, and they were in there like cheering and doing these little cheers and ooh, 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 and all this kind of thing. So um, it's actually a great memory, oddly enough. But no, I was not teaching at his school. I just happened to be very involved in the school, so knew a lot of people there.
Wow, that is absolutely fantastic. And certain things in our cancer journey just really stand out in our minds, and certain milestones and everything like that. And these certain points help you remember, these groupings of events that happen. And so that's a beautiful thing to remember. Oh, and especially that your son played such an integral part in all of that. And so that's amazing, absolutely amazing, especially for a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
That
I was
that is
very
special.
fortunate. And I think I had said last time, cancer, it's everybody gets cancer. It's not just the patient. And oddly enough, the funny thing is that sometimes it's easier. And I don't know, Mark, if this was your experience, but it was mine. I felt that it was easier for me than for everybody else because I knew what was going on, and everybody else was kind of just standing by and watching. So I am always mindful that, everybody copes in their own way. And I think for my son, much like me, his coping was getting involved in things because it didn't seem so scary. And we've talked about this on the back end, later. But I do remain mindful that it is a lot for any kid to take on. And I never want to be dismissive of that because I think that the cancer journey is so profound for everybody, but kids are still kids whatever age they are. And it is scary to think about losing a parent or watching a parent be ill. So I just kind of want to, call that out to say, like, as parents, when we're dealing with this, we have to remember that they're still kids and doing events like this. As beautiful and amazing as it was, there was still a game going on. They were winning that game, and that was good for him. You know what I mean? To just get to be a 15-year-old football player in the other four quarters.
Wow, that is awesome. That is absolutely fantastic. I'm always fascinated with families and how different families um, react to cancer and how different families either come together or grow apart as a result of it. And yours definitely grew closer. And I think that sets the tone for the rest of life moving forward as well. When you can come together in a crisis, and cancer definitely is a crisis, when you can come together as a family in a crisis like that, it just makes for just a better family relationship moving forward. What do you think about that?
I think that, and I've watched a lot of different families, like through my advocacy work, I've been there to watch different families. And you're right, how families move through a cancer diagnosis can say a lot, not only about the family, but it can also contribute to the outcome. I think that some of the families that I've seen, um, there's one in particular, I actually lost one of my very, very dear friends to pancreatic cancer, and his family was remarkable, are still remarkable. And I think about that example a lot of times that even in the worst moments, they were laughing and smiling and really trying to make the best of it. And I think that makes a huge difference because the, I said this earlier, life does not slow down just because you have cancer. The world doesn't stop spinning. There are still bills that need to be paid, dinners that need to be cooked, kids that need to get to activities. There's homework, there's work, there's all these different things. So the family dynamic can really shift when, especially a parent is ill. Who is picking up the extra slack? Who's getting the kids to practices and stuff like that? The role of caregivers becomes incredibly important. And I'm sure that's something that you know about as well. The people that are taking care of us, whether it's our family, our friends, our neighbors, even just acquaintances or sometimes strangers, all play this huge role in how successful our family can be in navigating some of these parts of cancer because they're having their own reality with it. It's scary, it's unsettling, it's dysregulating. Life really gets turned upside down when somebody's going through chemo or radiation or, going to have surgery and stuff like that on any instance. But then when it's cancer, even the littlest things become a big deal. I remember one of the things for us is with pancreatic cancer, one of the first things that goes away is like your ability to eat normally. And, kids love sweets. I love sweets. And I remember one night sitting there and everybody felt like really bad because, they were having whatever and I couldn't have it. I was like drinking an Ensure milkshake or something, something really unappealing. And everybody kind of looked at me and felt bad. And I was like, I think my mom was the one that broke the silence. She was like, just because she can't eat doesn't mean we're not, you know? And everybody kind of chuckled about it and stuff like that. But I do think that our family grew um, in terms of our ability to deal with each other because it was really hard. And I don't ever want to make light of the fact how hard it was. but I think that we were trying to make the best of it, and everybody was doing their part so that I could do the big work of battling cancer. And that's something that I appreciate.
Talk about your son's role. You mentioned that he was caregiving for you.
Hmm.
So what was his life like, going to school and he was what, 15 at the time or
15, yeah,
14?
he was 15.
Uh, so talk about that part. I mean, that's a big burden on him at
Yeah,
his age.
I think so. And I think that one of the things that everybody in our community was very committed to, and again, I have to say the football team, um, really like they swooped in, and moms and dads and coaches and teachers and everybody just right away they swooped in and they just put their arms around this kid and made sure that they made his life as normal as possible. Um, one of the things I was really adamant about was he was going to keep playing football and we weren't going to let that be disrupted and stuff. So parents were helping out, like if I had chemo or whatever the case was, making sure that he never missed a game, he never missed a practice. He did not miss school, all of those things. I think we were really committed to keeping his life as normal as possible. My daughter was younger, and so she was with her dad. And we kind of felt like it was better for her to stay there because she was so much younger. And I don't know if in some regards that was harder for her because she couldn't see the day to day. Like she was away, she came multiple times and stuff like that. But I don't know if that may have been harder for her, like kind of trying to keep her away from it all, may have in some kind of way been a little bit more difficult. But I think for my son, creating normalcy, we had kids over at the house a lot. Like that didn't change. We were the hangout house. So, the football team and stuff like that was still coming over and hanging out and doing our normal things. Um, I think him being a caregiver created a level of compassion and sensitivity in him. I wish it didn't have to be him, but it was just the two of us in the house. So whether it was, you know, helping me with just things around the house and stuff like that. He did go to chemo with me a couple of times. Tried to even make that fun. Um, and I think that one of the things I remember most was one day I was just so sick and I just couldn't even get my shoes off. And I remember him bending down and didn't say anything. He just helped me take my shoes off. He just untied them and put them on the side. And that was a very simple gesture, but it was just like at that point where I was just like, I can't even bend over. If I bend over, everything is going to come out. And I was like, we don't need a mess in the house on top of that. So I think that having this kid in the house, in some ways, it was disconcerting because I thought, I don't want him to see this, but it did push me to not look sick. That was one of the things I was like, I am just not going to look sick. Because I didn't want him to be afraid that something horrible was going to happen. And I did not want him to see me wasting away. So it was still, going out to football and the games and practices. And I remained the photographer the whole season. I was out there, in the heat and everything else, and that was keeping me going. And I think it kept him going too.
Wow. That's wow. That's all I could say about that. I mean, how you were able to do that, going through everything that you went through, that's amazing. Um, if you fast forward, looking at him today, how would you attribute that experience that having a caregiver for you at this age? How did it play into his maturity as a person today?
I think in some ways it made him grow up too fast. On the day that I had surgery, the doctor, all of my friends were there and, with him and everything like that. And the doctor pulls him, and my closest friend was there, a couple that I know was there. And they told me the story later on, but basically the doctor came out and he said, okay, so if something goes wrong, we got to come and tell you, right? You're next of kin, all of that kind of thing. And I think that was such a big burden and a responsibility for him is it's like he was the responsible party in that case. Even though like, friends were around him and stuff like that. He had friends that came from school. That was the one day they all got a pass to get out of school was to be at the hospital with me. But I think looking at him now, I can see the toll and the burden that it took on him very young. There was a period of time, and it's hard for me to answer this question because I don't always, we don't always know what our kids are thinking. I kind of know from interviews that we've done or times that we've talked and stuff, but I think that it created an anxiety that was unnecessary. I think that his level of responsibility was so much that was almost like burnout very early on. It was like now he's trying to adult, and I think that experience was very difficult and very complicated for him. And I don't know that we always give kids the space to safely talk about the things that maybe they're afraid of or the anxieties that they have and stuff like that. I think they always come out in some kind of way. But I see him now and he's still very responsible and he worries, if I have the slightest cough, he's like, are you okay? Did you go to the doctor? What's wrong? And I'm like, everything's fine. And I will say that it's funny because one of the things that he tells me is take care of yourself. If he sees me stressed out or, working all the time, he says, well, Mom, life is short. You gotta take care of yourself. And he's 24, almost 25 now. But he's been saying that since he was like 15 and 16, right? So I think he grew up really quickly. And I wish that he could have had more of a, you know what I mean, normal teenage experience. But when I ask him, he says, no, my life was great. I had a I had great high school times and stuff like that.
Wow, that's amazing. I love this conversation. It's
Mhm.
to get on the inside of just things that we go through as cancer patients is just really that's the special part. When you could see your son, grow up to be a man and how he played such a vital role in you getting better. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. So let's move forward um, in your journey and talk about dating.
Yeah,
Because,
that's a funny topic, actually. It's funny. We said this before the show, like that's not something people talk about when they think about having cancer.
right,
But it was this very strange situation. Going back to the day I was diagnosed, I was supposed to go on a date that day, right? And all of that clearly fell apart very quickly. Poor guy, he was like, cancer? What? Huh? Yeah, no. You just have fun with that. And so I, went through cancer kind of alone. That was something that was really different was, I know a lot of people that have cancer, and a vast majority of them are married or coupled or whatever the case is. And it was really weird because as much as everybody was there for me at night, I'd go home and it was just me. And one of the things I remember was the little click, click, click of the little machine that was the catheter, my pump that was doing the chemo overnight and stuff. And I just remember being very afraid and just thinking, oh God, what if something goes wrong? And, here I am, my son's in the house, but he's just a kid, right? So one of the things that I had decided once I was cleared, in the clear and got the official, somewhere around November after surgery, hey, you're tumor free, you're good, everything's fine. I was like, I'm going to date because I was trying to date before all this happened. That was part of my busyness as I was, trying to find a partner. So I thought I got to get back on that. So a friend of mine and I were talking and I was, you do the whole online profile and all those things, right? And I just remember saying, first of all, I have a port. I have this big old thing sticking out of my chest. So what? That's very unsexy and unattractive, right? What am I going to do about that? Do I disclose? Do I tell? What do I do? I actually posted some of my profile pictures. I had an array of profile pictures a couple of them I was bald because I had taken them during cancer and I posted them and I thought, well, they're going to find out sooner or later, right? Much to my surprise, I actually did have interest in a few dates here and there and stuff like that. But I remember telling this friend, I was like, when do I say, or do I say? Is that like after the first cocktail? Is that before dessert and coffee come? Like, when do I like throw this on somebody? Like, by the way, 6 months ago, I almost died and I'm better now and everything's fine. But I had this really crazy cancer. And I couldn't quite figure out how to work that into a date conversation. Lo and behold, I did meet somebody. Um, I hadn't planned on telling him. I covered up my port. Thank God it was winter. It was just 5, 6 weeks after I'd gotten out of surgery. Had not planned on saying anything. Somewhere halfway through the conversation, I kind of just blurted it out because we were getting along so well. And then I thought, okay, he's asked me to go out on Friday and I was still in chemo. And I said, okay, well, how do I say this? So I said, he said, do you have plans on Friday? I said, well, no, I just have chemo. And he was like, what? And so I had to tell him he was great. Um, Incidentally, the time you tell somebody is like after the third or fourth cocktail, or at least that's when I chose to do it. And Friday came around. I got a phone call while I was sitting there in the chemo chair, and he said, hey, did you say Chick-fil-A French fries in a shake or in a Coke? And I said in a shake. And he goes, oh, good, I got it right. And I look up and the nurse is like waving me down. And she's like, somebody's here to see you. And the nurses were all excited because they knew I was single this whole time. And this really good-looking guy comes in with a Chick-fil-A bag, and they're just like, who is this guy? And that was kind of how it started. So that was almost 10 years ago. Needless to say, he hung around, shockingly enough. Has been a fantastic plus one ever since. And we will be moving to LA. So I guess the port and all the chemo talk didn't scare him away.
For sharing that. That is so great. I had one question
Yeah.
for you, backing up to your son.
Mhm.
So, as a mother, as a parent, we always want to set an example for our children. So, how did how did that aspect, you setting the example of strength for your son, talk a little bit about that, you
Sure.
know?
Yeah. So oddly enough, and we talk a lot about my son because he was there. My daughter was, she was so much young, not so much younger, but she was young. She was 13, 12, turning 13. Both of them have said me going through cancer because they're my kid reminded them that they could overcome any challenge.
Hmm.
And they've both said that as adults. My daughter's 22 now and he's turning 25. Um, I think that both of them now as adults not only have compassion, but I think they have maturity. I think they have this sense that even when things are really, really terrible, there is still the possibility to come out on the other side even better. And I think that is a lesson. It was a hard-earned lesson for both of them. But I see both of them in their individual lives when they have faced challenges, they have both come back to, we got through your cancer diagnosis. Not even just I got through it. We got through that and we're still here. So I think that when I think about the impact of cancers, there's so many negative things that happen, right? There's some positives sprinkled in there too. Would never want anybody to have to go through that to get the positive. It's like we're not advocating that. But I think finding those little sprinkles of the positive and the good help push all of us through. Whether it's somebody that's listening to the story, our personal, circle, or even ourselves. There's times now where I think, okay, one of our favorite sayings in our house is we can do hard things. That's hard. we can do hard things. We know we can. We've done them. So I think that, even in terms of my son, I think that having to sit on the sidelines and kind of watch is one thing, but I think that actually being there in the game of cancer builds a resilience for doing hard things, whatever those hard things are.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Teona, as per last time, we have so much more to talk about. Would you be interested in coming back for a part three?
Absolutely.
Plus, I enjoy talking to you.
I can tell you more crazy date stories.
Bring it on, bring it on. It's great. So, one final question before we close up today. How has cancer changed your life moving forward? And a part two of that question, did the cancer experience uh, change you for the better?
It's funny because that question, and I'm sure you get asked a lot too. I get asked this question a lot. Did it change me for the better? I think physically, if I'm being honest, I think it did not. There are changes that come in your body with cancer. I'm 51 now, and I feel like cancer ages your body very quickly. So there are side effects and impacts and things that I'm dealing with. I think personally, though, cancer helped me have a better understanding of life overall. I think that I understand now that, you know, anything can happen to anyone, right? And again, that we can survive difficult things and not only survive them, but we can thrive through them. I think the way that cancer changed me, though, and I don't know if it was as much the cancer as it was understanding that in an instant, anything can happen. There was BC before cancer, there was D-Day, and then there was AD after diagnosis, right? And I think that each one of those moments in time taught me something different. I think now the biggest lesson is I go do things. I would always wait and say, well, there's time to do that. And I think a lot of people probably say that, right? I recognize now there may not be time. And it's better if you're thinking about it, whether it's call somebody, go on a trip, whatever it is that you want to do, go do it because now is what we have.
I couldn't have said it any better. That is awesome. Teona, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with everyone and with me as well. And I look forward to part three. It's been an honor. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you out there for joining us here at the Be Your Own Hero. Please like, subscribe, make a comment in the comments section. And just as Tiona mentioned, life is short. We only go around one time. Life does not wait for anyone. And so make the most out of each and every day, each and every hour, each and every minute, and each and every second. It's all precious. That's why they call it the present. So we will see you next week. Thank you very much and have a great upcoming week. And we will have part three next week with Teona Ducre. Thank you very much. Bye bye.